And I mean, I like studio visits for that reason. I think there's something interesting for people to be able to see sort of the chaos. Hi, my name's Leif. I'm a multidisciplinary artist who works with a lot of drawing and sculpture and installation, and I'm based in Toronto. I essentially like exploration. My entire art practice, for better or for worse, is centered around pushing forward, exploring. I really believe in process, where you learn with your hands, where you're using materials. The materials help you figure out what you're making. I think it tends to be much more interesting if it's surprising to yourself. I've always loved when different objects in a spatial field connect to each other. So when you have an object up here and one back here, and when you look at it and from a specific point, they look like they're stacked on top of each other. So that is the basic dynamic of these installations. I'm composing objects that are going to stack on top of each other in space and become flat. A finished sculpture, it might sit beside another finished sculpture that sits behind a drawing, and when seen from a particular vantage point, they become one sculpture or one figure. Often one of those will start in the middle of the room, and then another one will go nearby, another one will go nearby, and eventually I will construct a whole environment of figures that live in this space. So I really don't want people to see what I see at the beginning, and then ideally at the end, there's a bit of like, oh, you know, this is another way you can look at it, and this is the organizational principle of it. Often there's a long period of making before I do an installation. So there's time between the installations where I'm just making stuff without thinking about installations at all. When I'm working, I'm always doing a bunch of different things. I'm going back and forth between the drawings, working on individual sculpture, individual drawings, and then figuring out how they should sit in a grouping. So this is a start of something, but I don't know where it'll go or if it'll go or whatever, but I'll keep on building this up, and then I'll mash it up with some other material. And I like the idea of finding out different ways to look at something after you've had it for, you know, years and years, ideally. Different little stories or different relationships or different narratives. This drawing here, this section of it was done maybe 15 years ago. And it's been sitting in the flat file, and I didn't like it that much. And then I added on this grid, this fence grid. Often there's something quite liberating about being able to work on smaller things. So you can be really loose before you sort of feel the pressure of all this commitment that you've made to a bigger image. And it's hard for me to do that if I've already gotten precious about something. So you can do something that you don't really like, or that became precious or something, or didn't work out, and you put it aside. And then in a year, you can pick it up and you don't feel precious about it anymore because it's sort of become unimportant in a way. And then you can, you know, scribble on it or do what needs to happen. There are parts to these that just don't work, and then they sit for forever. And then I find the right spot for them. But the way I know that things are done is often through narrative. I'm essentially interested in storytelling, though the stories are quite ambiguous and often take a fair amount of exploring by the viewer. I feel like the story is interesting or funny or something is there, and that's often how I know that I would say it's done. When someone comes and sees one of these installations, I want them to explore it on their own, see all these different juxtapositions between objects and materials and narratives. And I want people to see their own path through the work. And then, like, after people have explored it, for them to see how I built it in terms of the logic of the building. And that is often seen either through a vantage point or a camera, or often a printed image. So the photographic result of these installations are flat, and actually people have a hard time telling what they are. They often think that it is a photo collage or done in Photoshop or something. It's quite important for me to not really manipulate the image after it's shot. So everything that you see is what is in the space. So, it's a little magic-y, illusion-y, but it's also quite interesting. I think it's appealing. It opens up the way we see things to people. So it's really a shift from the ordinary, a joy. It's a lot about pleasure. I think I get a lot of pleasure in making it, and I think you can feel that in the work. And so I hope that people get pleasure from seeing it.